Okay, hopefully it doesn't crack the shell. Okay, wow, this video is about to take a hard right turn. Let's see how it goes. Well, hey, welcome back to Video Break. Oh, old tech alert. Welcome back to Video Breakdown, the show where I try to reverse engineer a content creator's style and see how hard or how easy the process is. If you're new here, welcome, welcome. I'm Andrew. Essentially what I do is I pick a YouTuber and analyze their style of content and then try to make a video in that style that covers a subject that they haven't already covered. At the end, I talk about what I learned, how long it took, how much it costs, how hard it was, and if I would do it again. Today we're going to be tackling one of the nerdiest YouTubers you will ever see, David Murray, also known as the 8-Bit Guy. The 8-Bit Guy makes historical documentaries and restoration videos on various old 8-bit computers from the 80s and 90s, but also other topics like the history of tech in Texas and even electric vehicles. The 8-Bit Guy channel currently has 1.38 million subscribers, which is really awesome to see that many people care about this kind of old tech. And on that channel, David Murray has made almost 300 videos over the course of several years. I started watching 8-Bit Guy about a year or two ago, and I find his geeky demeanor just so interesting yet charming, and his restoration videos just suck me in, and they're really nice to play in the background while I'm working on something else. I pretty much know what topic I'm going to cover already, there's a little hint in the background there, but let's jump right into our research phase. Okay, so he's got his little intro here. I don't really think I'll be able to recreate that since I don't have any of that floppy disk hardware that he has, but I'll see what I can do. Starts most of his videos with an explanation in front of that curved desk, and then puts in some cutaways about what he's talking about and why he's going to restore it. He occasionally uses little graphical callouts to highlight what he's talking about. Gets lots of viz of the before and after of what he's restoring. Ooh, occasionally stuff goes wrong here. That's all right, that makes it into the episode. Sometimes he gives a little bit of a history lesson about the product, but I think for the sake of timing here, I'll skip that one. He usually uses Windex, alcohol, WD-40, and hydrogen peroxide to clean and restore during this whole process. Sometimes even letting things soak in alcohol. He uses lots of different camera angles. You can tell he's almost constantly moving the camera to get close-ups and wide shots of what he's doing during the process. That is what's probably going to make this process take the longest. He sometimes uses pretty crude methods of just washing the plastic. At the end, he usually does a before and after wipe, so I got to make sure I take the pictures in the same spot. And my video is going to involve soldering, which I'm really excited about because that's a skill that I've been meaning to hone, but I don't have a good reason to use it most of the time. And then he gives a bit of an outro as to how he plans to use what he restored in the future. All right, I think we generally have a good idea of what we're in for here. Okay, so what topic am I gonna do? Well, like I said, I kind of already decided, which was necessary in this case, because with videos like this, you kind of need to order some parts online and make sure that you time their arrival for your filming schedule, so I got them already. And so the challenge that we're gonna take on in this episode is doing a restoration and screen replacement of my brother's old Game Boy Advance. If you're familiar with Game Boy Advances, you should immediately be able to tell what's wrong with this one. It is not supposed to be this color. This looks like it came from the home of a smoker. It's really supposed to be that color, or maybe closer to this color. Now this is quite common in most of the restorations that the 8-Bit Guy tackles. Basically this happens from UV exposure or otherwise sitting in the sun for long periods of time that yellows the plastic, but this process can be reversed through an activity called retrobriting. Basically you let it sit in hydrogen peroxide and then flood it again with UV light and it'll return it to basically its original color. But you can also probably tell that the retrobriting isn't all that this thing needs. It's pretty dirty, it's scratched up, and the screen, as it came manufactured, is really dark. That's because the original models of Game Boys didn't come with a backlight, but I'm about to solve that problem. This is a modern day screen replacement kit made by a company called Funny Playing. It basically takes modern day phone screen IPS technology and replaces this old hunk of junk and makes it look bright and new. Now I've been really excited to do this mod ever since I first thought of the idea, and I really want to get some games going on this thing that probably hasn't been played in over a decade and use it on commutes and road trips and stuff. Some of the deeper scratches and gouges in the plastic I might not be able to fix, but I do have this donor Game Boy Advance that is actually in better condition, but that's not gonna make for as good of a video. So I might steal some of the plastic pieces from this guy. And when I say donor Game Boy Advance, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this one, it's just this one has a bit more sentimental value. Now wait, I hear you saying. The Game Boy Advance is not an 8-bit console, so why are you doing it for the 8-Bit Guy episode? Well, the 8-Bit Guy doesn't exclusively stick to 8-bit consoles. He's done 32-bit content in the past, and like I said, he talks about Tesla cars, so there are no rules. Now, whoa, I also hear you saying, 8-Bit Guy has done a Game Boy screen replacement video in the past. How right you are. But in that video, he did not restore the Game Boy, he just replaced the screen. This guy needs some restoration. Plus, it was a Game Boy Color, and I think a Game Boy Advance is different enough. Also, I just really want to replace the screen in this thing, and I really want to do an 8-Bit Guy video. So let's just get to it. Now, one of the biggest early challenges that I foresee in this video is figuring out where and how to film in this apartment. The 8-Bit Guy kind of has a curved desk that he works at that's shoved in a corner, and ironically, this desk is kind of the perfect thing for that. It's in the corner, but it's facing the wrong way. Plus, it's got a monitor mounted to it. So the question is, am I gonna rip all that stuff off the desk and turn it around just to film over there? I don't know. I just don't know. But we're probably in for a pretty long episode here, so there's no time like the present to find out. So yeah, I decided to bite the bullet and disconnect my entire PC setup just to turn the desk around and be able to work on it. This is probably the most convenient spot in the apartment to film. The only problem is this thing. This is the mount for my monitor, and unfortunately I was smart enough to screw it into the desk. Hopefully I can just push this out of the way, crop it out, and in the actual episode, you won't see it. Now it's time to work on the 8-Bit Guy's trademark super flat and even lighting, and then I'll dig through my collection of t-shirts and see if I can find something nerdy enough. See you then. Okay, as you can see, I've got my lighting squared away. It's pretty flat and even. I tried putting a daylight bulb into this light behind me, but it just ended up being too bright, so we're gonna leave that off. Unfortunately, I dug through my old collection of t-shirts and I couldn't find any of my Sonic or Mario or video game ones, so this was the nerdiest t-shirt I could find. We're gonna have to go with it. Now, I know the 8-Bit Guy does his audio by mounting a Zoom H4n above him on the ceiling, but I really don't feel like drilling holes into my ceiling just for this one video, and it's probably not even gonna sound that great anyway, so for now, I'm gonna stick with the lavalier mic, and hopefully you don't hear too much rustling against my clothes. For this, I can't find a way to crop it out of the shot. If I have the shot too tight, then you'll be able to see me but not the desk, or the desk but not me. Short of putting something in front of it to cover it, I guess I'm just gonna live with having it in the shot. And speaking of the desk, this is actually set up pretty true to the way the 8-Bit Guy has his. It's flush against the wall on this side with a very narrow space to get in and out on this side, and I definitely see the frustration that he had before he revamped his studio space and gave himself extra room, because it is a pain to get in and out from behind this thing. I'm gonna get a few last things squared away here, and then we'll jump right into filming the actual episode. Now, in my Morgan Drinks Coffee episode, I mentioned that there's a fine line between doing a performance that was inspired by someone versus doing a full-on impression. This is gonna be a full-on impression. I'm not making fun of the 8-Bit Guy. I am celebrating the 8-Bit Guy. I think he's awesome and hilarious. So here we go. Hello, and welcome back to the 8-Bit Guy. Okay, you're gonna have to endure my air conditioning for most of this filming because it is too hot in here to not have it on. I've got my main camera doing a sort of wide, my secondary camera doing a close-up. Okay, now we're just gonna do some silent work for a while I take this thing apart. Okay, so one part of this disassembly that I have no idea what best practice is, but I'm gonna have to learn pretty quick, is taking out the old screen. I'm not really that worried about damaging the old screen because I'm gonna replace it, but if I can avoid damaging it, I'd like to, because if I need to reverse this mod somehow, or if the replacement with the new screen doesn't go right, you know, I'd like to have something to fall back on, so we'll see what happens. Okay, I decided to load up a tutorial that will hopefully hold my hand through this whole process. This one is by The Broken Past. It's about 46 minutes, seems informative. Well, let's hope. Okay, wow, that is like the coolest thing I've seen all day. The case that holds the kit in is shaped exactly like an original, an original Game Boy game, right down to the little notch and all the little markings. That is really cool attention to detail. And made in China, made in Japan. That's hilarious. The only thing it's missing is a little security bit. That's cool. Okay, my next priority here is going to be testing the new screen kit as it requests right here before I actually do the full install, which I'm gonna try and be very diligent about because otherwise this is gonna be a whole lot of work for a whole lot of nothing. Okay, wow, that looks awesome. That looks really good. You can see a couple scratches on the screen protector, but that'll peel right off, and some text there. But that is definitely giving me the motivation to continue through this process, which so far has been a little arduous, but this is looking great. I'm excited, really excited. So we've taken apart the Game Boy Advance. We got all the pieces apart. We haven't cleaned it yet. It's very dirty still. We tested out the IPS screen. It looks great. And we have gotten apart our circuit board, and we can take a look and see what might be wrong with the speaker. Next step will be cleaning these discussing pieces and retrobriting this, assuming that there's enough sun outside, which, wow, there really is not. If only this could have been done yesterday. So I've changed batteries, but as you can see, I also changed my approach a little bit. It was too much of a pain to keep track of moving around two cameras at the same time, so this is gonna stay my main 8-bit guy camera, and much like the Food Wishes episode, this is gonna be the wide BTS camera. I've got these macro extension tubes for the Canon camera here that are gonna let me get quite close on the electronics here. Okay, so far so good. It's actually been a little bit therapeutic to sit down and clean this thing, but I gotta manage my time wisely. I'd love to take a break, but I need to get some stuff outside into the sun to retrobright before the sun goes down. Thankfully, it's around, what, 4 p.m. right now? Ooh, 5 p.m. So I got at least 2 or 3 hours until the sun goes down. The bad news is the sun is behind many, many clouds right now, and it is raining. So I'm worried that even if I try to retrobright using my hydrogen peroxide, it's not gonna do anything. In the interest of time, and because there isn't really that much else to do until I get this done, I might try and do the retrobright solution today, leave it out there for a couple hours, and just see what happens. Couldn't hurt, but the one thing that I'm wondering is, how long is the hydrogen peroxide good for? Is it like once it's been out of the bottle for a few hours, it doesn't retrobright anymore? I don't know. Either way, I'm gonna make an attempt to retrobright it today, and if not, I may have to wait a day or a couple days or a week until we get some nice sunny weather, and we can turn that yellow back to iceberg blue. Wish these things luck out here, because I might be wasting an entire bottle of hydrogen peroxide. Okay, I changed my mind. Something tells me that leaving it out there when it's this cloudy isn't gonna do anything, and I'm gonna waste the next 4 hours pretty much for nothing. So instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring it inside. I just finished watching a 8-bit guy video that I've seen before where he talks about how heat can be just as effective as UV, and you can just put the hydrogen peroxide and whatever you're trying to retrobright in a pot on the stove, set it at 160 degrees or so, and then leave it there for an hour or two. That is what I'm gonna do next, because the Game Boy Advance pieces are small enough to fit in a pot. So let's make it happen. Okay. Now the other way that I may in fact be messing up this process
is in the percentage of hydrogen peroxide solution I'm using. See, this is 3%.
Okay, Andrew, I'm just gonna cut you off right there. Basically what I was trying to explain is that the 8-bit guy uses a higher concentration of hydrogen peroxide, but then dilutes it. So I was wondering if I could get by using a lower concentration of hydrogen peroxide and just not diluting it. That's it. So because the clip on the back of the battery cover is broken on the original case, I've been waiting for a new one to show up in the mail for like about a month now, and I just took a break and went for a walk, and by sheer coincidence, I checked the mail, and it happened to arrive on the exact day when I needed it. So here it is, let's take a look. I actually ordered two. One is for this one, which is also missing the back cover. There they are. You can see the color is pretty close, although this one might also be a little bit yellowed, so it's hard to tell. They both say Game Boy, but the replacement one, the font is slightly different, but I'm not that picky, I don't care. As long as it clips in properly. Well, that's definitely the wrong shade of indigo, but at least it has one, and the battery cover's not open, so whatever. Okay, this video is about to take a hard right turn. Earlier, I mentioned switching retrobriting techniques from the outdoor one using UV light because it was too cloudy to one on the stovetop. Specifically one that the 8-bit guy mentioned in a video where you bring the hydrogen peroxide on the stovetop to about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's roll the clip.
My next thought was using the stove. These controls don't have exact temperature controls, so it will take some experimentation. I also noticed that it had a warm zone and a melt zone, so hopefully those can be set to lower temperatures. After all, I don't want to literally melt the plastic, but from what I can tell, that won't happen for ABS plastic until over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Using an infrared thermometer, I was able to find a stable temperature pretty close to 160 degrees. I'll let that do its thing and check back in 4 hours time. Okay, so here we are 4 hours later. I can already tell the key looks different. And here it is compared with the control.
So I did that and left it for about 2 hours, and after 2 hours the front piece still looked too yellow, so I left it for another 2 hours. After about 3 hours total, in the meantime I was just researching retrobriting techniques, and I saw multiple other people online saying that if you put the hydrogen peroxide at too high a temperature, it can not only bleach the plastic, but also warp the plastic. And guess what? That happened. Here's what the front piece looks like now, and they no longer go back together properly. So, okay, I guess the restoration part of this video is over. Nothing to do now but cut our losses, say a quick prayer for the destroyed Game Boy shell, and add the IPS screen to this guy. And that does leave the question of what to do with the innards of my brother's Game Boy. I guess at some point I will have to buy a third-party shell to replace this one, which ironically will still look better than the way that this one started. But for now, in the interest of getting the video done, we're gonna set it aside and work on my cousin's Game Boy Advance. Thankfully, this one actually doesn't need any restoration at all. It's extremely clean, the buttons all feel great, the speaker sounds awesome, and it plays games properly. So let's just get the screen in there and try to get excited about it. All right, update time. I've been working on this indigo shell for well over an hour now. It took forever to trim away all the parts around the frame here to make sure that you don't see any of the plastic when you put this lens on, because this lens is slightly bigger than the old lens. So that took a while, but now I'm finally ready to install the screen. I got the gasket in there and I'm about to cut some of the pieces away. I'm about to put this little guy as a spacer in right here. In fact, I may as well roll on that. And hopefully it doesn't crack the shell. Oh goodness, very nice. It's all coming together. Now is arguably the most important part, which is getting the screen in there pretty much permanently. Here we go. Okay, moment of truth. We're about to close it up and see if it works. And if it doesn't, boy, am I gonna be sad. Rolling on the B cam. It's past midnight. I wish I could go to bed, but we're so close to the end here. Let's just clean up and finish this with an outro. That about wraps it up for this episode of the 8-Bit Guy. Thanks for watching. That was the one, we did it! We did it! It's done! It looks great! Okay, editing is gonna take a while. I'm gonna take a little break and go to bed. See you in editing. All right, the very last thing to do is recording the narration. Now, this is a pretty long video to just sit down and script out the whole thing. It's sitting at around 11 minutes right now. So I'm gonna try a little shortcut and I'm just gonna try and improv it. Just gonna sit and watch the episode and just kind of improv 8-Bit Guy-isms as I watch through it. I've certainly seen enough 8-Bit Guy episodes, so let's see how it goes. By the way, the last time you saw me on camera was the very end of the sweltering summer, and now it's Christmas. Anyway, no, this is just completely filthy. All right, that wasn't too hard. Now let's get to even more editing. All right, that was quite a bit of work, and it got kind of hairy in the middle there. Let's take a look at the episode and see how it turned out. This is 8-bit guy. Hello, and welcome back to the 8-bit guy. One of my favorite consoles that I used to play on as a kid was the Game Boy Advance. Now, I personally had the Game Boy Advance SP, which had a frontlit screen, but I always secretly yearned for a screen that was better and had brighter colors, more similar to a modern phone screen. And so I'm going to take this old Game Boy Advance that is very yellowed. It looks like it came from the home of a smoker. You can see the original color on the back here. And I'm going to retrobright it and replace the screen with this modern IPS screen from the company Funny Playing. Now, the main reason that I want to do this is because I've been having a lot of fun playing Game Boy Advance ROMs on my phone lately, but I'm looking for an experience that's more true to the original hardware, and I'd love to get some more use out of these old games that I played during my childhood. So, without further ado, let's take this Game Boy Advance apart and clean it up. Now, the console does work, so there isn't really anything wrong with the electronics that I'll have to fix, but the audio is a bit intermittent. Sometimes the speaker works and sometimes it doesn't. At the moment, it does appear to be working, but it might be a loose wire or something like that, so I'll have to take a look at that when I get it apart. You can see I'm just barely able to get a good angle for you to see the screen as it is. So obviously the first thing that I had to do was open this guy up. Now this is just completely filthy, both on the outside and partially on the inside, but the circuit board does look to be in good condition. The volume knob seems to spin just fine, so it might be an electronic issue that's preventing the volume from working properly. A couple more screws to get the circuit board out, and I had access to the screen. You can see from these buttons and pads that this is just caked in years of grime, probably from palm sweat and snack-covered fingers. The directional pad was actually kind of stuck to the rubber. I just unlatch these little clips, and out comes the ribbon cable, and the screen is detached. A couple flexes on the plastic shell, and the screen starts to loosen. Out it comes. There it is, you can see the original sticky gasket holding it in. I'll just peel that away. And as you can see, the screen itself is actually in quite good condition. Here are all the parts laid out, and now it's a bit easier to see the discoloration and all the griminess. This was probably left face up in the sun for hours. The original very scratched lens just pops out with a little bit of pressure, and there's more of that original color underneath. Time to unbox the new screen. That's cute. It comes in a little Game Boy cartridge case. The kit comes with a couple extra wires that I'll have to solder in later to help control the brightness. Please test the kit before installation. Will do. The ribbon cable just pops in the same way that it came out. And I'll pop a couple batteries in to test it. Yep, it seems to be working fine. Wow, that looks so much better. Of course, I'll have to disconnect the screen to do some more work on the system. Here you can see a difference between the original scratched lens and the new one. The new lens is slightly bigger on the inside to accommodate the slightly larger screen size. Last two pieces of metal come out of the shell for retrobriting. And time to get to work on the circuit board. I'll start with spraying with a bit of 91% isopropyl alcohol and scrubbing along with a toothbrush. I'll give some extra attention to the power switch because I've heard that can be a trouble spot. Work out some of the grime from the volume knob. The speaker is magnetic, so I had some trouble getting off some magnetic debris from the front of it. One of the pins on the cartridge connector seemed to be a bit corroded, so I just scraped it away with a screwdriver, and yeah, I'd say that's a 70% improvement. Of course, I'll also do the regular cleaning with a Q-tip and rubbing alcohol. That should help the games read a little bit better. Time to get to work on the plastic itself. My first line solution for this is Windex, so I'll just spray some on there and oops, almost forgot the battery connectors. These were definitely a pain to get out. I'm not even sure how I did it, but I got them out. All those years of grime washed away down the drain, finally. Now I've put the plastic pieces in two separate bins for the retrobriting process, and I'll just pour on some hydrogen peroxide. I'll put in some weights to weigh down the plastic and try and work out the air bubbles so that they don't float. And I'll just cover in some plastic wrap and put them outside in the sun. Unfortunately, it was rather rainy today when I decided to do this, so we'll come back to that topic later. In the meantime, I'm going to give these gray pieces a little hot water bath with a little bit of dish soap to try and loosen some of that grime. The yellowed plastic was only outside for a few minutes before I decided that this was probably going nowhere. I'm going to try a different retrobriting technique that involves putting the hydrogen peroxide in a pot, getting the liquid up to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and letting the pieces sit in that hot solution for a few hours. We'll come back to that in a little bit. These gray pieces of plastic have finished their bath, and you can see some of that disgusting crud that came off. Yuck. I'll dry those pieces off and give them a nice good scrubbing. About 3 hours later, I fished the pieces out of the hydrogen peroxide solution, and that's when disaster struck. I guess the temperature was too high, and it actually ended up bleaching and warping the plastic, and now the two pieces don't fit together properly, and they're even more discolored than when we started. Ugh. Okay, well, I'm just gonna have to put that aside and do the screen installation on a different Game Boy Advance that I had. This one is in much better physical condition and isn't going to require quite as much restoring as the other one did. Even so, the original screen you can see is just as dark. So it'll just be a simple screen replace going forward. Time to start the whole process all over again.
Let the drum beat go.
Now that it's apart comes the arduous process of trimming away some of the extra pieces from the case that are going to get in the way of the larger size of the new screen. If you don't have the proper tools for this task, this can take quite a while. I thought I had the right tin snips, but I ended up dremeling most of it out, and you can see all the flaked pieces of plastic on my desk, and this took well over an hour. Finally, it's time to install the screen for good. On goes the new sticky gasket, and a couple of spacer pieces to make sure the screen sits in the right spot. I know you've all been waiting to see this moment. Off comes the screen protector from the new IPS screen. I had to gently, carefully line up the screen. The spacer definitely helped. And there it is, stuck in there. You can see on the other side the rough edges of the plastic that I had to grind away, but this shouldn't be visible underneath the new lens. Speaking of which, on it goes. Press in firmly. And now comes the soldering that I talked about earlier. This is going to let us control the brightness of the screen using Select and L&R. Unfortunately, my camera decided to focus on my soldering iron rather than the actual soldering for this, but there go the wires. I'll start the process to put it back together. Solder the other ends of the wires to the board, and time to close it up for hopefully the final time. Wow, that looks amazing. Time for the final peel. And the grand reveal. And here's the new screen compared to the old one.
Game over.
And here's the finished product. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. As far as I'm concerned, the Game Boy Advance has never looked better. I'm really looking forward to going back to some of my old saves on these old cartridges like Metroid and Pokemon. But that about wraps it up for this episode of the 8-Bit Guy. Thanks for watching. Whew, you know, for a mildly stressful episode, that actually did turn out pretty fun. Let's jump right into it. What did we learn? Well, obviously the biggest thing is to double check your facts when you're doing something like modding a console or boiling plastic in hydrogen peroxide. To be clear on what happened with that situation, I had the temperature at exactly the same temp that the 8-Bit Guy had in his episode. And if you look at it side by side, we actually both bleached the plastic in that instance. I'll give him a note because he was experimenting with techniques in that episode, not actually giving direction to his audience on how to do something. And it's definitely on me for not double checking that information before I started, but hey, now you know if you ever try something like that. I'm pretty pleased that I got to improve a bit on my soldering iron skills, except for the fact that I actually kind of did it wrong. I swear I followed the instructions to a T, but the way it's supposed to work is you hold the select button and bring the brightness down with L and up with R, but instead just pressing select ups the brightness. Oops. Not that big a deal. It still looks awesome. I'm super happy with this mod, and I've played and beat about half a dozen games since I put it together. The cost for this episode was on the higher end. The Funny Playing screen kit came in at about somewhere around 60 bucks. I can live with that cost because this is something that I really wanted, and I'm definitely putting it to good use. Now, the time commitment was definitely up there. It's been one of my biggest ones so far. After the filming, editing, more filming, and more editing was done, this episode is clocked in at about just over 9 hours. And those 9 hours were spread over one full day of filming, one full day of editing, and then another half day of a little bit of filming and a little bit of editing. Since this is the main thing that the 8-bit guy does, and his videos are generally longer than mine ended up being, I can totally see how it takes him a long time to make a video and why he doesn't put out videos weekly. And a perfect example, I have a day job, and so these 2.5 days of work ended up being spread out over 4 months because I just had to find the time to work on it. But I'm really glad to put this episode to bed and move on to something new. And finally, the difficulty rating I'd say is a pretty easy 9. The shooting wasn't too hard. Once I got into a groove of using my main camera as just a wide BTS cam and my secondary camera just basically moving it a few inches on every single shot, the editing was very straightforward, and my technique of doing the voiceover on the fly just as I watched through the episode ended up working out really well. So for production techniques, it was pretty middle of the road difficulty-wise, but the actual mod itself took a long time and just needed a lot of brain capacity to get it done. And obviously I messed up in a couple ways. So the moral of the story obviously is do a lot of research before you start on a project like this, but if it ends up working out, you're gonna have something really cool to show off. If you like this video and you wanna see more, feel free to subscribe and maybe leave a comment telling me which content creator you'd like to see me cover next. David Murray, if you end up seeing this video, I really hope you were entertained. Again, I was trying to celebrate you. I think your videos are awesome. All you audience members, if you've never watched the 8-bit guy's content and you're interested in that sort of thing, definitely go check out his channel. Special thanks to my wife for doing an on-the-fly a cappella version of the 8-bit guy's theme song. That was fun. And thank you so much for watching, and please, go make somebody smile today.